Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we'll have the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. We've got much fresher, drier air masses through this week, and that's why we have seen a lot of sunshine through Monday, and we'll continue to see sunshine throughout the rest of this week. There could be a few transient weather fronts around, so there is a possibility of a bit of light rain, but for most it is still a dry week, but a much sunnier one. As we head towards the weekend, though, that's where we could see a real change. It does look likely that especially through Saturday into Sunday, we start to see northerly winds arriving, and not just chilly air moving in, but cold, properly cold Arctic air flooding in from the north, and that is setting the scene for the rest of the month. Now, we've spoken about this a lot in the past few videos, and we'll continue to look at this very cold air mass in more detail today. Of course, looking at the severity and the timings, and of course, longevity of this colder plunge. That is, as I said, looking likely to arrive through the weekend into next week. Of course, we'll look at the latest GFS, GM, ECMWF, and we'll finish by looking at the ensembles to give us a little bit more confidence in what the sort of spread is within the models at the moment. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now you can see at the moment it is another dry evening, recording this around 7:30, and you can see not too much is going on, and we've seen very similar scenes over the past week or so, but the big difference is we've got clearer skies that will allow temperatures to fall away at night, but during the day it's a lot more pleasant. Chilly, again, with the cooler air masses, it does feel a bit colder, but I think I definitely prefer that with some sunshine than the gloom we saw last week. Now, do put on the temperatures. Sun has set now. You can already see inland, especially over higher ground, temperatures are starting to drop away. The warmest temperatures or mildest temperatures are all along the coast, closer to those mild sea surface temperatures. Because remember, the sea surface temperatures always have a couple of month lag on sort of the coldest air and the warmest air respectively. So in actual fact, the warmest sea surface temperatures we normally see are actually in September, and the coldest is normally March or April. So you can see, it being early November, we actually do have still relatively mild sea surface temperatures, probably closer to the warmest we see than the coldest. That's why it does impact what we see at the surface during the early part of the winter, and that's why we've got milder air towards those coastal regions at the moment. But over the coming days, it is going to remain fresh, and if we do look at the latest UKV, you can see as we head into Tuesday, again, lots of sunshine around, a few clouds popping up and a few showers in the far southeast, but another reasonably pleasant day. Into Wednesday, a bit of a transient weather front in the north, maybe bringing a bit more thicker cloud for most, so maybe a slight return to more miserable conditions. But into Thursday, we start to see some clear slots developing, and you can see eventually through Friday into the weekend, look at the north. We start to see this cold front sweeping in, and this is that very cold air starting to arrive through Saturday and extending further southwards as we head into Sunday. You can already see some snow falling across some of the Scottish mountains. You can see the upper air temperatures starting to turn cold, if not very cold potentially in the far north. Again, I'd classify very cold as anything around 10 degrees below average, and cold as anything 5 degrees below average, and it definitely looks like for all we're going to get 5 degrees below average. Some, as I said, could nudge towards that 10 degrees below average, all dependent on how strong that northerly flow and how direct it is. But you can see through Saturday the cold air is starting to properly arrive. You see that both on the dew points dropping towards freezing, if not below freezing, especially inland, and as we'll see from the 2 meter temperatures, already getting very cold through the weekend. And you can see overnight tonight into Tuesday, could wake up to a frost in some inland areas, but we're not expecting anything too widespread at this stage. The air mass isn't that cold to be seeing those frosts. Into the afternoon though, for Tuesday, widely sort of 8 to 12 degrees, hovering around average for the time of year. And as we head into Wednesday again, the risk of frosts inland, and by the afternoon, once again, 8 to 12 degrees. It's pretty much a repeat on Thursday, a bit more cloud around, so we might hold those temperatures up slightly higher, and the same can be said for Friday. Again, chilly in the far south, and again by the afternoon, kind of 8 to 12 degrees. But look at Saturday, a bit cold in the south to wake up, but that's a frosty pattern, not cold air properly arriving. But look at Saturday afternoon, for most, it's kind of 8 to 12 degrees once again, but look at northern Scotland, widely 1 to 5 degrees as we start to see that cold, if not very cold air starting to arrive. And I wouldn't be surprised to be seeing similar sort of temperatures up and down the country. It is looking unlikely now that we see sort of conditions that are sort of conducive of ice days and things like that. It is looking unlikely we see something like that. But 3 or 4 degree highs, that could be something that could be arriving next week for all, even low-lying areas further southwards. That looks like a real possibility. Colder than that? Probably not, just because the latest runs don't have too much support for something that cold, but definitely 3, 4, 5 degrees, which is very chilly for the time of year. Now, if you go over to the latest GFS, which has been very much the most optimistic run over the past few days. Today, it is still cold, but it's a little bit more realistic with its pattern, not producing, as we saw on Saturday, the coldest November run I've ever seen. It's not that cold today, but it is still very chilly. You can see that high pressure retrogressing westwards over the coming days, opening the door to a northerly wind. And you can see, though, if we look at the isobars, it takes this kind of curved track from Svalbard towards Iceland and then in off the North Atlantic. And I know it doesn't look like a massively long track on this chart, but we must remember that this is a 2D chart and the Earth is, of course, a sphere, so it doesn't always correspond to distances. They're not always correct in terms of their relativity on these charts. So actually, this is taking a pretty long sea track, and we can see that if we look at the upper air temperatures, lots of that cold air going towards Iceland and then turning towards the UK, and by Sunday it does take a lot longer for that cold air to arrive. Now, we saw from the UKV on Sunday already that -5 isotherm was heading through much of Scotland, so already the UKV disagrees with the GFS here by day 5, and it's these sort of details that could be the difference between 4 or 5 degrees cold or 1 or 2 degrees the risk of snow. So these are the sort of differences we're now looking at. You can see, though, eventually we do see a little bit more of a succinct northerly wind by the middle of the following week, with the -5 line through for all. Then it goes cold, if not very cold. And again, if we do zoom in to the United Kingdom, look, you can see overnight temperatures well below freezing, daytime temperatures kind of 1 to 5 degrees. So as I said, as expected, this is kind of the median. This is what most runs are showing. Some slightly milder, some slightly colder. And you can see the subsequent days well below freezing during the evening and low single digits during the day. Of course, a bit of a gradient, probably close to freezing across Scotland, maybe 6 or 7 degrees along the far south coast. Of course, close to those sea surface temperatures, which are still, as I said, well into the double digits for the time of year. Again, it is very difficult to see something sort of March or sort of February, January temperatures in those far southern areas. But regardless, very cold as we head towards the end of this GFS run. Eventually, though, we do see a break, and we do see westerly winds trying to push in. Now, the blocking is still there or trying to hold on to our north, but we do see this westerly breakthrough, and it is likely to happen. You know, you can't keep this block going on forever, but interestingly, the GFS already does it here for the final few days of November. Again, I wouldn't rely on this too much because we've seen it numerous times before, especially early on in the winter. Some of these blocks can last a lot longer than initially forecast. I think it was back in 2022 that we thought we were going to see a 1 week of cold weather turn into 2 weeks because that block kept going and the westerly wind stopped pushing in and kept getting blocked and kept slowly getting pushed back before eventually breaking through. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if something similar happened here. But again, that is something that we will look at probably in a week's time or so. If you do look at the snow and ice, you can see, especially for Scotland and for higher ground across Wales, but again, I wouldn't rule it out. Even there across the far southwest of England, you can see there's a bit of snow, and again, to low-lying areas, a possibility as well. Again, not guaranteeing massive amounts of snow, but even here, a bit of a snow event for northern and western regions for Monday the 25th, before eventually fading away. So definitely looks like a real possibility of snow, or even a high possibility now, I'd say, for northern regions. More medium to low risk further southwards, which is inevitable this time of year. But most winters, most late autumns, we have a 0% chance of snow in November. So it is a real change this year. If If you compare to the GM, of course, it's been a bit pessimistic over the last week or so in terms of producing cold weather, but it's finally on board the last couple of days, and it's still on board today. Again, that westerly wind eventually degrades away. We see the high pressure clear out to our west, and then again we see this initially northwesterly flow, very similar to the GFS, where it goes through Iceland and then curves in off the Atlantic. Just this hook, taking a much longer sea track than it needs to be, a couple hundred miles more across the ocean, just moderates that air by a couple of degrees, and we can see that at the upper air temperature level, we really struggle to hit that -5 line in initially. So again, all about how direct is that northerly flow. Of course, the UKV was a lot more direct in this, so yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Eventually, though, the -5 line does get in for all, and right towards the end of the run, it is cold, if not very cold. -10 line even trying to move in. You can see here, much more direct northerly. The isobars coming straight from our north, whereas early in the run, they're taking a bit more of a longer track around these small, subtle lows. So again, that is something to keep a very close eye on. Interesting though, the block is well on here. It's not weakening at all, really. And yes, it's not quite up towards Greenland, so it might become more of a northwesterly, which could encourage milder air further southwards. Regardless, it is still very blocked in the North Atlantic, and we wouldn't be expecting any westerly winds to break through in at least a few days after this chart. So GM looking very encouraging for a sustained colder spell towards day 10 here. And again, just for comparatives, as we do zoom in, look at those surface temperatures during the day, widely around freezing to 4 degrees, and overnight dropping down towards freezing, if not a few degrees below freezing, especially inland. And then snow depth, you can see a bit of snow around, but nothing too much towards day 10. But again, considerably more than we normally see during mid-November. Now, to finish by looking at the latest ECMWF, this has just come out, so unfortunately we don't have all of the data for it, but we've got the pressure and temperatures, the most important parts. Again, high pressure moving out to our west over the coming days. Eventually that northerly wind arrives, and again it takes a much longer track here. These low pressures are slightly more separated, which actually means we don't see northerly winds initially this weekend. So a huge difference to the UKV. Look at where the cold air goes, just to Iceland, not towards the UK. So a massive difference to the UKV, and this is why I've still got a lot of uncertainty even over the conditions this weekend. UKV is straight northerly, cold air flooding in, as we saw at the beginning of the video. ECMWF develops a low pressure system over the top of us with milder air towards the south. Cold air eventually gets in a few days later, and especially towards the end of the run, but it's much more it has a lot more encouragement, for lower pressure development there towards the weekend and into next week. So that is intriguing, I must say. Definitely a lot more unsettled, and again, allowing these lows to develop to the east of the block. It is quite surprising. Again, it's all down to where the jet stream goes. But again, it is a realistic outcome. This probably would be less cold. It'd probably be just chilly and sort of slightly fresh, but it would be exceptionally unsettled, and there could be heavy snow in the north. We do hang on to the colder air. So ECMWF a little bit milder today, not quite as blocked and as cold as the other runs, but regardless would still be very impactful, just maybe not with snow or ice, more with wind and rain and just chilly conditions. Now, if you look at the ensembles to finish the video, though, you can see there is strong support for well below average temperatures next week. We're around average or above average over the next few days, but into the weekend we flip to well below average, about 5, 6, 7 degrees below average. So we're kind of in between that cold to very cold. As I said, a few runs getting down towards that -8 to -10, which for the time of year is very cold, but most around that -5, -6 region. Again, this is London. Further northwards, it'd be a couple of degrees colder. You can see it hovers around that 5, 6 degrees below average for a number of days, a good 4, 5, 6 days, maybe even longer. But again, more uncertainty does build in the longer term. It does look unsettled as well. So again, we are looking quite likely to see snow in the north. Further southwards, again, uncertainty because of some of these smaller, milder sectors that could mix in. But regardless, still looking cold as we do head into that longer term. Dew points, again, getting down towards freezing again. That's kind of the big tick point for seeing wintry weather. You need those dew points below freezing to see snow and ice. So again, that is an important feature, and that is what we're seeing here as we head through Saturday into Sunday. So again, ECMWF that keeps us very mild definitely is on the warmer side of the ensemble suite. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to see the ECMWF ensembles because of the timings, but because it hasn't come out yet. But again, you'll be able to see if you look at the ensembles later on this evening or into Tuesday morning, you'll be able to see that it should be a pretty big outlier. 2 meter temperatures, again, big drop through Sunday into Monday, down to also 4 or 5 degree temperature highs. Again, don't look at these two literally in terms of the actual numbers, but again, just look at the trends more because they're not always the most accurate, especially beyond sort of a few days. And then just to finish by looking at the latest ECMWF, as expected, the midday run hasn't fully come out. You see the midnight run again, around average or above average, well below average into next week. But again, lots of spread into that longer range. A bit more pessimistic, I must say, than the GFS, but again, it's going to be one to watch. It's probably because of those lower pressure systems trying to push in from the south. You see Glasgow here is much colder. Again, not too far below the 1991-2020 mean, but of course, Glasgow's mean is a couple of degrees colder than London's. So here it is getting out towards that -3, -4, -5 region. So I do think it is a bit more of an active jet stream within the ensemble suite for the ECMWF. So again, that's something to keep a close eye on. That could cause significant snow in the north, but milder, wetter conditions further southwards. So we've got all these things to decipher over the coming days. Yes, it is going to go cold. Yes, there probably will be snow around, and we are going to be well below average for the time of year. Details beyond that, we still need to determine, and I think it is now really going to be watching those shorter range runs, especially at the UKV, Icon, Arpege, as we head into next week for the details for any winteriness and of course those temperatures. We'll of course keep up to date with those longer range charts because they are still very insightful for sort of that day 7 to day 14 time frame, as again we've got uncertainty over the longevity and the severity next week. But yeah, looking encouraging if you're looking for something colder as we head into next week. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.